Why some people never apologize. A story. In a small town called Brookdale, everyone knew each other. The streets were quiet, the houses were close together, and people shared their lives like an open book. Among the residents was a man named Daniel Carter. Daniel was known as a hard-working businessman who owned a small construction company. He was intelligent, confident, and successful. But there was one thing about Daniel that everyone noticed. He never apologized. It didn't matter how small or big the mistake was. If Daniel was late, he would say traffic was terrible. If a project went wrong, he blamed the workers. If he hurt someone's feelings, he simply ignored it. To Daniel, saying, "I'm sorry," felt like admitting defeat. One day, Daniel hired a young architect named Ethan. Ethan was talented and full of creative ideas. He worked hard and believed in teamwork. In the beginning, things seemed fine, but after a few weeks, Ethan noticed something strange about Daniel. Whenever something went wrong, Daniel blamed someone else. One afternoon, during an important meeting with clients, Daniel presented a building design. However, the design had several errors. The measurements were incorrect, and some important details were missing. The clients looked confused. Ethan quietly whispered, "Daniel, I think the wrong file was sent. The final design is different." Daniel looked at Ethan, annoyed. Instead of checking the mistake, Daniel said loudly, "Ethan must have prepared the wrong version." The room became silent. Ethan was shocked. He knew the design had been approved by Daniel himself the night before. After the meeting, Ethan approached Daniel in his office. "Daniel," Ethan said calmly, "I think there was a misunderstanding in the meeting. You approved the design yesterday." Daniel leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Well," he replied, "you should have double-checked it." Ethan waited for a moment, expecting Daniel to realize his mistake, but Daniel never did. There was no apology. Weeks passed, and this pattern continued. Workers were blamed for delays, designers were blamed for errors, even clients were blamed when projects failed. Slowly, people in the company started losing respect for Daniel. They still worked for him, but the trust was fading. One evening, Daniel stayed late at the office. Everyone else had gone home. As he walked through the quiet building, he noticed something unusual. Most desks were empty. 2 employees had already resigned that week. Ethan was also planning to leave. Daniel sat alone in his office, staring at the city lights outside the window. For the first time, he wondered why people were leaving. The next morning, Ethan came to Daniel's office. "I wanted to let you know," Ethan said, "that today is my last day." Daniel was surprised. "You're leaving? Why?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly, "Because people want to feel respected. Everyone makes mistakes, Daniel, but when someone never takes responsibility, it makes the whole team feel invisible." Daniel didn't respond. Ethan continued, "You're a brilliant businessman, but leadership isn't about being right all the time. Sometimes it's about admitting when you're wrong." For a moment, the room was silent. Daniel wanted to defend himself. His mind searched for excuses, reasons, explanations, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the empty desks. Maybe it was the quiet office. Or maybe it was the realization that success meant nothing if people didn't trust you. Ethan picked up his bag and walked toward the door. Just before he left, Daniel spoke. "Ethan." Ethan turned around. Daniel looked uncomfortable. His voice was quiet, almost unfamiliar. "I may have been wrong about the design that day." The words felt heavy. He had spent years avoiding them, but finally he said the words he had always refused to say. "I'm sorry." Ethan smiled slightly, not because the apology fixed everything, but because it meant something had changed. Sometimes people never apologize because they believe it makes them weak, but the truth is the opposite. The strongest people are the ones brave enough to admit when they're wrong. And for Daniel Carter, that day was the first step towards becoming not just a successful man, but a better one. Why Some People Never Apologize, Part 2. After Ethan left the office that day, Daniel sat quietly in his chair. The room felt different. For years, Daniel had believed that being strong meant never admitting mistakes. In his mind, apologizing meant losing control or showing weakness. But Ethan's words kept echoing in his head. Leadership isn't about being right all the time. That sentence followed Daniel the entire evening. When Daniel arrived home that night, he noticed something else he had ignored for years: silence. His house was large and beautiful, but it felt empty. His wife Laura was sitting in the living room reading a book. "Hey," Daniel said. Laura looked up and smiled politely. Their conversations had become short over the years. Daniel was often busy, stressed, or irritated, and he rarely listened when someone disagreed with him. Daniel sat down across from her. "Laura, can I ask you something honestly?" She surprised. "Of course." "Do you think I have a problem admitting when I'm wrong?" Laura stayed quiet for a moment. She had wanted to say something like this many times before, but Daniel never seemed ready to hear it. Finally, she said, "Do you really want the truth?" Daniel nodded. "You're a good man," Laura said gently, "but sometimes you care more about being right than about understanding people." Daniel felt those words deeply. They were not said with anger, but with honesty. For the first time, Daniel began to realize something important. People had not left his company because he was strict or demanding. They had left because they felt unseen and unheard. Over the next few days, Daniel started observing his own behavior. In meetings, he noticed how quickly he blamed others when problems appeared. When workers tried to explain something, he often interrupted them. It was a habit he had built over many years. Changing it was not easy. 1 week later, a problem happened at a construction site. A shipment of materials arrived late, which delayed the project. Normally, Daniel would have blamed the logistics team immediately, but this time he paused. He asked the team what had happened. The manager explained that the delay was caused by a last-minute order change that Daniel himself had requested. The room became quiet. Everyone waited for the usual reaction. But Daniel took a deep breath. "That delay was my decision," he said. "I should have planned it better." The workers looked at each other in surprise. Then Daniel added something even more unexpected. "I'm sorry for the confusion." It was a small moment, but it changed the atmosphere in the room. People suddenly felt more comfortable speaking honestly. Slowly, the company environment began to change. Employees started sharing ideas more openly. Mistakes were discussed instead of hidden. Problems were solved faster because people were no longer afraid of being blamed. Months later, Ethan visited the town again. Out of curiosity, he decided to stop by Daniel's office. When he walked inside, he immediately noticed something different. The office felt more alive. People were laughing, discussing projects, and working together. Daniel saw Ethan and smiled. "Ethan, it's good to see you." They sat down and talked for a while. Ethan listened as Daniel described how the company had changed. "Turns out," Daniel said with a small laugh, "apologizing doesn't destroy leadership." Ethan smiled. "It builds it." Daniel nodded. "I spent years thinking apologies made people lose respect for you, but the opposite happened. People trust me more now." As Ethan prepared to leave, Daniel added one final thought. "You know something strange?" he said. "What?" "Apologizing is difficult only the first few times. After that, it becomes something simple, something human." Ethan smiled. And that day, Daniel finally understood the real answer to the question he had once ignored. Some people never apologize because they're afraid of losing power. But the people who learn to apologize discover something far more valuable: respect, trust, and stronger relationships.